As most of you might remember, at the beginning of this chapter, chapter 6, we discussed what public opinion was. And just kind of as a review for you, I want to show you or remind us of what public opinion was. One general definition for public opinion is the aggregation of people's views about issues, situations, and public figures. Basically, what do most of the people in the United States feel about issues, situations, and public figures? But I said in this class, being that we're studying the U.S. political system, I thought it might be a little bit better and be more useful if we used the definition that public opinion are those opinions held by private persons which government finds it prudent to heed. And what that means is public opinion are the things that the people are talking about that the government thinks it's important to listen to. And I think we use the example of the government really doesn't care whether or not we believe that Britney Spears is talented or not. That's a public opinion. We could probably aggregate the views and the beliefs of the people in the country about that. But it's not something the government would care about. So some other examples we used were drinking and driving. Drinking and driving has always been an issue in this country, and I would argue it's been an issue since before we had automobiles. There were probably people driving horse and buggies that were drunk and shouldn't have been. But at some point, the government really took a closer look at drinking and driving, or driving while impaired, because some mother in some city started a program called Mother Against Drunk Drivers. And eventually enough people started talking about that issue that many levels of government got interested in what that issue was. And then we start to see the government do more things like regulate and pass laws and things of that nature. So we said that public opinion is important because our elected officials and our unelected officials, the bureaucrats in the government, like to take a look at what the public feels is important. That way they know what issues to address and which issues they don't need to address. The next question that we have to ask is, how do these public officials figure out what public opinion is? How do we figure out what most Americans feel about issues that are important? Basically, what we're asking, how is public opinion measured? Public opinion is measured by using polls or the process of polling. Okay? Polling or polls are scientifically measuring the occurrence of an event within a population without measuring the whole population. Here we got two words that we need to really be aware of. We have what's called the population, and then you have what's called the sample. Okay? The two words that you need to be familiar with here is population versus sample. And population, based on this definition, is whose opinions are you concerned about? Do I want to know how everybody in the United States feels about an issue? If I am, then the population of my poll is everybody in the United States. If I'm worrying about how Missourians feel about an issue, then my population is just simply the people within the state of Missouri. Okay? And the second term you need to be familiar with is the term called sample. And the sample is the portion of the population that you're going to ask the question. An example we can use to compare population to sample is, let's say we have this question and we want to find out how everybody in the United States feels about the question. Do you think that the government would do a better or worse job than private insurance companies in, one, providing medical coverage, and in, two, holding down healthcare costs? What our population in this situation would be the whole United States, because we want to find out how the average American feels about these two questions. But instead of having to ask everybody in the United States these two questions, what I do is I ask a sample of the people in the United States. I just ask a small percentage of the people in the United States this question. And then after those people give me the answer to this question, what I do is I take a series of very sophisticated scientific and mathematical equations and principles, and what I do is I can make the assumption, if everything's done correctly and scientifically and mathematically, I can make the assumption that if 25% of the Americans feel that the government can do a better job at providing medical coverage and holding down costs, if 25% of my sample gives me that answer, then I can assume that approximately 25% of the American public is going to feel that way. Okay? But I haven't asked the whole population. All I did was take a small sample of it, and then I just apply those findings and assume that as long as everything's done mathematically and scientifically, I assume that if I was to eventually ask everybody in the country, their answers would be very similar to the answers that were given by my sample. Okay? So in this poll, which we're going to see more about later, what we're doing is we're trying to figure out how the whole American public feel about this question of whether the government or private insurance companies could do a better job at providing medical coverage or holding down healthcare costs. But instead of having to ask everybody, I just ask a small sample of them. I only ask some of them the question. Okay? We're going to use this question that I just used here just now. We're going to take a closer look at it later. We've got that actual polling question and some results for that very question that was asked for later on in this